Isaac never thought he'd inherit anything. His family ties had always been thin, strained by time, distance, and long-forgotten arguments. So when the letter arrived, old, yellowed, smelling faintly of mildew, telling him he was now the owner of the Granger estate in the dying town of Marrow Hollow, he thought it was a cruel joke. He almost threw the letter away. But something in him, call it desperation, call it curiosity, drove him to pack his life into a battered car and make the long journey out to the forgotten countryside. The town of Marrow Hollow wasn't on any modern maps. He had to follow half-crumbled roads and ancient wooden signs nailed to leaning posts. When he finally arrived, the sight of the town chilled him more than the cold autumn air. Empty storefronts lined the cracked main street. Houses sagged inward, their windows like gaping mouths. No children played in the streets. No dogs barked. It was a place abandoned by hope. The Granger estate sat on the edge of town, hidden behind a thicket of dead trees. The house loomed like a wounded beast, its roof sagging, its walls clawed by time. It was a once proud mansion, now crumbling and forgotten. Isaac's first steps inside were hesitant. Dust choked the air. Spiderwebs laced every corner. And that hallway, long, narrow, stretching away from the entrance, immediately unnerved him. Still, the house was his. He had nowhere else to go. He set up camp in the least damaged room, a small bedroom on the second floor. He tried to ignore the way the floorboards groaned under invisible footsteps, or how the walls sometimes seemed to pulse, as if the house were breathing. The first 2 nights passed in uneasy silence. The third night, the knocking began. 3 knocks. Slow. Measured. Coming from the end of the hallway. Isaac bolted upright in bed, every hair on his body standing on end. He convinced himself it was a draft. An animal. Anything but what it sounded like, a visitor. But the knocking continued the next night. And the next. Always at exactly 3 a.m. One night, unable to stand it any longer, Isaac armed himself with a flashlight and a crowbar and crept into the hallway. The darkness seemed thicker here, almost alive. The flashlight's beam barely pierced it, swallowed by shadows that shifted and moved just out of sight. He reached the end of the hallway where the knocking had come from. There was no door, only a wall, cracked and faded. Confused, Isaac pressed his hand to the wall. It was ice cold. And then, under his palm, the wall knocked back, 3 deliberate raps that made his blood run cold. Isaac stumbled backward, heart hammering against his ribs. From the corner of his eye, he saw a figure, tall, thin, impossibly pale, standing at the opposite end of the hallway, where his bedroom was. When he turned to look fully, the figure was gone. The days grew worse. Isaac found deep, old scratches inside the walls, hidden behind peeling wallpaper. Mirrors reflected not his face, but a hollow-eyed version of himself, mouth hanging open, screaming silently. At night, he heard voices whispering behind the walls, speaking in a language he could not understand. The guest was growing closer. Desperate for answers, Isaac scoured the local library, tucked away in the shell of an old church. He found fragments of history. The Granger estate was once home to a reclusive sect, scholars, mystics, and dreamers who had fled persecution. In their isolation, they had sought forbidden knowledge, performing rituals meant to thin the barrier between worlds. They succeeded. And they brought something through. A being that was never meant to exist on this side, something that needed permission to fully enter. 3 knocks. 3 chances. Once you acknowledged the knocks, you became its anchor, its doorway. The guest wasn't malevolent in the way a man was, it was worse. It was hungry. Curious. Patient. It didn't want to kill. It wanted to become. Isaac tried everything to protect himself, salt lines across the floor. Sigils drawn in chalk. Prayers whispered under his breath. Nothing worked. Each night, the guest grew bolder. He would hear footsteps padding down the hallway, slow, deliberate. He would see the door handles rattle. Sometimes he would wake to find muddy footprints on the floorboards, leading from the front door, down the hallway, to his bed. One night, he awoke to find the guest standing inside his room, at the foot of his bed. The figure was no longer blurred by darkness. It was a man-shaped thing, draped in shadow, its face hidden by a shifting mass of smoke. Its hands were long and bony. Its mouth, a lipless grin carved into an eyeless face, whispered his name over and over, Isaac. 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 Isaac fled the house. He drove until his car broke down, miles away. He stayed in motels, in abandoned barns, under bridges. But every night, at exactly 3 a.m., he heard it, 3 slow knocks. At the motel door. At the window. At the walls. He realized the truth, the guest had not been bound to the house. It had been bound to him. He had accepted the knocks. He had invited it in. There was no escape. Weeks passed. Isaac wasted away, sleepless, hunted, a hollow shell of the man he once was. One night, as he sat huddled in a ruined gas station, he finally gave in. When the 3 knocks came, he did not resist. He stood up. He opened the door. The guest stepped forward. It smiled, a smile of endless, bottomless hunger, and embraced him. They say that sometimes, if you drive through the backroads near Marrow Hollow, you'll see a tall, thin man standing by the side of the road, smiling, knocking 3 times on the passenger window of your car. If you open the door, you'll never leave Marrow Hollow again. Because once the guest finds you, it never lets you go.